research project, field-wide research project, and couldn't be more excited about the results from that work. And so we're thrilled to be here today with the two primary investigators of this research. First, we have Dr. Michael Layton. He is the W.K. Kellogg Community Philanthropy Chair, and that is at the Dorothy A. Johnson Center for Philanthropy at Grand Valley State University. It's a mouthful. And then we also have Dr. Adriana Lozon Ceballos, the co-founder of Colmena Consulting. Thank you both so much for being here, and you have such incredible bios. I think we could take up our whole session just going through all of your accomplishments. So what I'm going to do is put a link to those in the chat. Please do, everyone on the call, go ahead and click through that link, and you can read much more about our guest speakers today and their incredible backgrounds and work. But in the interest of time, and because we have so much to share with you today, I am going to now turn it over to Adriana to get us started.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'm so excited to be here. I see some familiar names in the room. I'm super stoked to be able to come back and share all of this research with you. So I agree, check out the website because that's another place where you can download the report, which you will want to do after this conversation. But you can learn a little bit more about us, and we're also on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect in that way. So let's get started because there's just so much to talk about. So why are we here? For the last year and a half, 2 years, what we've been doing is sitting down with Giving Circle leaders, Giving Circle members, the organizations like Grapevine and Philanthropy Together, and a few others that you may have come across, to say, what is the impact of coming together and pooling our resources to give? And what we found was more like just blew our minds beyond amazing at how collective giving is transforming philanthropy and transforming ourselves in the process. And so we're super, super excited to come back and share some of these findings with you. So let's jump in. We want to thank our funders. We were able to secure some funding to be able to do this research, and those folks that were supporting our work are on the screen. But really, this is the screen that I want to spend some time on. I know when I started my Giving Circle, I benefited from being part of the Latino Giving Circle network. It held my hand. It showed me how to launch a circle. It helped me recruit members. It did all the things that allowed me to feel unalone in this. So many of us are coming together because we want to do this with others. And the ecosystem and the field of collective giving continues to grow in ways that are truly inspiring. So when we share the slides, I encourage you to check out all of these organizations. But let's keep going. You're already part of one. And let's just say we're going to be talking a lot about the power of Grapevine when we found that 1 in 3 circles are hosted in Grapevine. So we'll dig into more of that. So what's in the report? I know that when you say download a research report, you're like, Adriana, really? I don't know that I want to read a lot of pages about things. But there's just so much exciting stuff in the report. So we're going to go over the 5 bucket of findings, and that way you'll get the cheat sheet and you'll get excited about that. But I think that the part that I really want to call attention to is the typology and the archetypes. As we say, you know one Giving Circle, you know one Giving Circle. But the reality is that this is something that's flexible, it's nimble. There are examples and different types of giving circles that are out there that you can learn from, where you can really start to see like, oh, if we do this, if we want to reach these goals, if we want to support these causes, like there are so many different models out there, all of which are pretty easy to find tools and resources to do. So I just wanted to say that's a great resource for folks when you're downloading. Definitely read that part of the report. So let's jump into the very first finding and say that this is something that I probably spent 6 months trying to calculate. But what we wanted to show is that not only is collective giving democratizing philanthropy, it's diversifying philanthropy. And we know that when, like back in maybe before you joined your Giving Circle, if you thought of a philanthropist, you might think old, male, pale, and stale is what they say, right? But the reality is that philanthropists are all of us. When you ask people who's the first philanthropist that you know, You hear things like my father, my grandmother, my aunt, the community around me. When we think and hear the word philanthropists, we should hear our names. We should hear who we are. And it is so important to feel that we have a seat at the table where decisions are being made that move resources into the causes we care about. And this movement is growing like you have no idea. I can't even believe that I'm about to say that nearly 4,000 giving circles exist in the country, mobilizing over 370,000 people. And just between 2017 and 2023, we've calculated that $3.1 billion have been moved. We aren't the cute movement at the table, right? Like we've earned a seat at the table that allows us to see ourselves as powerful, as resourceful, and as worthy of saying, I get to say where this money goes. And so this movement is growing really fast. And the other thing that was really interesting for us was that it's been growing a lot since 2016. And it's not a surprise. Like we've had a lot of groups like Grapevine came in at 2020, right? Philanthropy Together came in 2020. Like a lot of organizations that have existed to fill the needs and the gaps of collective giving groups and members and leaders have really started to grow over the last 5 to 7 years. And so that's driving a growth in the movement that we can see.
Right.
And the other thing that's really important about this is that folks stay for about 7.5 years. So this is really a great opportunity to create strong bonds, to create learning opportunities, and to really educate and activate philanthropists in your community. We also found that collective giving groups are overwhelmingly led by women. This is a very female movement, but this isn't to say that men are not here. Men were very much here, but this is really a space that is acting to be relational, it's acting to be collective, it's acting to be intentional, and it's acting to do philanthropy differently. And it's really changing who and what we consider as a philanthropist. We found that over the last 4 years, 60% of new members identified as BIPOC. So this is diversifying and democratizing philanthropy. But that is only part of the situation, part of the picture. So I'm going to hand it over to Emily to say what it looks like for Grapevine.
Thank you so much, Adriana. Some really, really exciting numbers there. And I'll just share too, and we can put a link to this in the chat, that there was a fun article in Axios that covered the launch of the report. And their big call out was that giving circles are now the fastest growing form of philanthropy. That's what those numbers mean, which is just really, really exciting for all of us. And so what we wanted to do is look a little bit more closely at that growth and see how much of that is from the Grapevine community, from all of us on this call. How much have we contributed to this field-wide growth and excitement? And so when we looked, we started with looking at the Global Giving Circle directory. And as you might recall, Grapevine collaborated with Philanthropy Together a few years ago to build and launch that global directory. And we had about 2,500 giving circles in the directory at that time in April 2021 when we launched it. 3 years later, April 2024, we're at about 4,000 giving circles. So that's that incredible growth. That is 60%. What we also know is that that's about 1.5 thousand new giving circles. So 1,500 new groups in just 3 years. So then we said, okay, this is an incredible number. How much of that growth is coming from new giving circles from the Grapevine community, from the work that we're doing here to help grow this movement? And we found that about 660 or 661 to be exact giving circles were launched by Grapevine in this period, in this 3-year period. That means 44% of that growth of those new giving circles in the last 3 years were from our collective efforts to launch new giving circles in new communities, invite new people into this movement, and help grow our overall impact together. So we're very excited about those numbers. We think that's just very exciting for all of us as far as how we are proactively helping to launch this move or grow this movement and turn it into the fastest growing form of philanthropy. So what does that mean now? Now what we're seeing as far as the overall Grapevine community, that 60% of all giving circles are active on the Grapevine platform. So that's really exciting too, because as a place to connect with other Giving Circle members and leaders, as a broad place for people to come together and resource for people, this is a place where 60% of the total field is active. About half of that, so just under 30% of all Giving Circles in the directory, so that 4,000 number, are using Grapevine's tools to start, manage, and grow their groups, collect donations, engage members, all of those things. So for all of you that are using Grapevine's tools, this includes you, right? 30% of all Giving Circles that we know of in that directory are actively using Grapevine's tools, just like you are. And then 17% of all Giving Circles were launched by Grapevine. So as I mentioned a moment ago, 44% of the new Giving Circles over the last 3 years were launched by Grapevine, but now about 17% of the total 4,000 Giving Circle field at this point were launched by us and by all of you and your efforts in joining these groups, taking on leadership roles, helping to get them up and running. So we're very excited about these numbers and the contributions that we've made to this sector. And this is what it looks like. This is the kind of snapshot of the Grapevine community at this point. As a community, all of us are involved in. We have now moved over $35 million. And this is just in the last 4 years, everyone, right? This is since we started. We launched in March of 2020. We launched that directory in April of 21. That was 1 year later, and all of this additional work over the last 3 years. So really incredible numbers here. We are, our community is now in every state across the country, and we have supported thousands of nonprofits. We have tens of thousands of members and over 1,100 active groups now on the platform using our tools. So we're very excited about all of these numbers and to just see really, we've known that we've been doing good work as a community. We've known that we've been growing, but it's really exciting to see just how much of an impact we're having on the broader field when you look at it in this context. So with that, thank you, Adriana, for giving me the chance to share a little bit more on that, and I'll pass it back to you.
This is so exciting. Like, this is so exciting, y'all, because I feel the power in the room. I feel the excitement of, like, this is something that we're stronger together, right? Like, I think in an increasingly polarized world, we forget what we can achieve when we come together. And so I just see these numbers and my heart just like palpitates so fast. I'm so excited about this research. I actually spoke for Michael for finding number 1. So you get to hear me again. So I'm going to keep going, but I swear I won't continue to hog the mic. This is where we shift from the research of, like, this is a scale, this is your piece in it, and you can claim so much of this success from your own participation. But so what do you do with this, right? Like, you're going back to your circle and you're like, that sounds great. What can I take from this and start to practice it? And so let's jump into the second finding. And from here on out, like, that's the framework that we're trying to take when we look at these findings. So I encourage you to write your questions down, put them in the chat. Like, if you're like, oh, this makes me think of whatever, we're going to have time at the end for Q&A, and it's a good amount of time. And I would love to hear from the folks in the room. All right. So finding number 2, collective giving circles greatly expand what gets funded, right? I can say, as someone who's been a philanthropist, a fundraiser for over 15 years, the first thing and the driving force that sent me to my giving circle was seeing the organizations in my community left out. They were not getting funded. The causes I cared about, the organizations that were grassroots, that were community led, were not getting funded. And so I knew that if we approached philanthropy differently, we would start to see different results. And what we found is that is exactly what's happening. Collective giving groups are centering equity when they're making funding decisions. What that looks like is that they can be explicitly committed to the cause of racial equity. They can be looking at their process for grant making with a racial equity lens. it can mean that their application is done with an intention to say, what are the barriers that usually leave the organizations that I want to fund off the application table, right? And 38% are actually prioritizing fundings that are communities that are disproportionately affected by inequitable systems, right? And philanthropy itself being an inequitable system. But collective giving groups is also driving giving by and for communities. What this means is that this is a very hyper local movement. And what that does is that it creates proximity to the causes, it creates proximity to the organizations, and it allows funders like philanthropists in your community to roll up their sleeves and work shoulder to shoulder with grantees. And that is very exciting because 93% of
Okay, what did I do here?
93% of groups draw members from a single locale or state. So it's very, very local. But how are they picking groups, right? You're like, okay, I want to be racially equitable. I want to do the process in the right way. I want to identify the groups that are left out. We asked folks, what is your criteria? How are you deciding which organizations you're going to fund? And it's not a surprise that we're coming together from a place of wanting our values to drive our giving. And so organizations that align with the values of the group is one of the highest priorities. But the idea that the organization also support marginalized groups is really important. And that the leadership from the organization reflect the community that is served. I say that to say that there's an opportunity when you're thinking about which organizations to fund is to say, is the community that's being served in leadership in some capacity? Are there leaders from marginalized communities guiding the decision making of the organization? And in what way is the organization connected to the community? We're coming back to you all now to say, we assume that folks in the room actually completed our surveys when we started 2 years ago. And we want to come back and tell you what we found. That idea of having feedback loops is something that is really important for groups with collective giving driving their giving. And smaller organizations, right? Organizations that might not have the ability to be professionalized to the point where they have a grant maker or a director of development. All of those things were really important to groups. And we'll share the slides. But the other thing that was important was that we found that organizations, yes, we will definitely share the slides, Michael. The organizations were trying to fund ethnic and racial groups based on gender and sexual ability, sexual identity, age groups, disability, immigrants, refugees. Like those are communities that are left out by philanthropy. And this was a way that we started to see resources move towards those groups. So now I will take a breath and hand it over to my partner and brother from another mother, Michael.
Oh, Michael, you're muted.
If you read the cover letter of our cover letter in the report, you'll see that we actually say, Michael, you're muted.
Yeah, it's part of every presentation I do. It's others do mic checks, I do mute checks. So Adriana, I've been encouraging Adriana to be more expressive in her presentations and try to be more emotional. So I'm really happy that has succeeded over the 3 years that we've been working together. What was I talking about? How collective giving pushes the bounds of how philanthropy is practiced. So who's a philanthropist, the size of the movement, but also how it's practiced. And we love to talk about the 5 T's of philanthropy. We all generally, as Adriana mentioned, think about treasure, think about money as being philanthropic, right? Pale, stale, and I forget.
Old, male, pale, and stale.
Old, male, pale. I left out the old male for obvious reasons. So when we think of the 5 T's, it's treasure. Time is a close second because we recognize volunteering as a form of philanthropy, especially when it is engaged and connected to particular talents. But the other 2 are very important as well. The ties that we have, the connections that we have, as well as testimony. And I think over the last decade or more, we have fully realized or starting to realize the potential of social media, of the internet to promote and facilitate all five of these T's. And I think it's a tribute to the power of Grapevine that they filled an important niche just in time for the pandemic, where people could find a way of connecting with each other and expressing their support for the causes that they care most about. And as a result of connecting through collective giving, as you can see on this slide, a person's ability to understand their community and their issues they care about, 86% of respondents say that collective giving has had a positive impact on that. The ability to understand philanthropy, the relationships that people have with community leaders, the amount I donate, and other is very high. And as researchers and people that do polling, in a way you hate other because it's messy, because people write stuff and they spell things incorrectly, even with spell check. And to try to capture the richness of the information there, it's often very difficult. But what we found is people really want to convey their particular experience. And so in the surveys that we conducted, we capture a lot of these other responses. And so just to just sum up this slide, it's a marvelous impact that collective giving has on all the T's, all the ways that people engage philanthropically. And when we look at this in particular, the kind of financial support, changing the way that philanthropy is done, general operating unrestricted giving is at the top. And this, for those of you that are affiliated with nonprofits, might serve on boards, might be staff, you know the value of that kind of unrestricted giving, where you can build your infrastructure, where you can invest in professional development. You can do the kinds of things that organizations need to do to grow and to thrive. And we found that collective giving, the members of collective giving are particularly sensitive to that. To have program and project expenses covered, also important, about 2/3 of groups given that way, as well as capacity building and coaching. So we see in the movement, people that are sensitive to those sort of infrastructure, organizational building blocks that make for successful organizations because of their proximity to community. So Adriana, keep up the good work. Use the forcefulness of your personality as best you can.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate this. But you made me think of something before. It links to this, and I also welcome this in the chat, because we're going to go into how this impacts participants, like the folks in the room, like you all. And you mentioned that during the pandemic, we heard a lot that groups were really grateful, that people were very grateful that they found their group or that they had their group, and that technology created a way to connect when we couldn't physically connect. And in some way, it really expanded our capacity to understand how we might create community in a more virtual space and reduce barriers to access. The number of people that said, I would have loved to be part of this giving circle, but it's a 1 hour commute for me and I'm in rural whatever, or it's LA. So it's going to take us, like, all of our socials were actually like poorly attended because people had to commute and they had kids and they had whatever. Like, the idea that we could do this from our own home, from our own desk, from wherever, this is really important, because what we found is that, and this is something that builds on my dissertation on Latinx giving circles in California, that it's good for our health. Collective giving is good for your health. And it really contributes to our sense of wellness. And it does that because when you look at the nerdy words for the aspects of wellness that the NHS actually says, these are the things that we consider aspects of your wellness, your sense of belonging, your health, living with purpose, feeling like you matter, all those things, they end up contributing to our ability to lead the lives we want to lead and to take control in ways that encourage us to take action in our community, which will be the next finding. So I just want to take a second to say that, like, from my dissertation and from the amount of folks that I've interviewed for all these research projects, people say this was really good for me. And I know that we don't want to push a type of giving that like is perpetuates the donor centricness that like elevates ego. This is a people powered philanthropic movement. It's about the people. People matter for this. Your members matter for this. You matter for this. And so when we saw that 55%, that's 1 in 2, said that their ability to lead a healthy life physically, mentally, spiritually was positively affected because they were part of this group. And the 83% said that their participation increased their confidence when taking action to change their community. I literally found the Latino Giving Circle network because I went into Facebook and I said, what do I do? Where are we? And I don't know where to start. I can't do this by myself. That sense of helplessness was overcome by doing it with others. And so I find huge inspiration for this because it increases your sense of belonging. 91% said that they feel like they belong to a community because of this, right? The ability to live your values, 78%. When we're talking about giving in values aligned way and being able to live our lives in values aligned way, like that creates an ability to live your life with a sense of purpose. It allows you to use your voice from a place of power. And that makes testimony, that fifth T that we keep adding, all the more important. We want voices in the room. We want to be able to hear each other. And so I will just say that this in particular was a big thing for me. But what does that mean, right? Like, okay, you may have heard me like, and that's how I found my giving circle. But why are people joining in the first place, right? Like, why are folks joining? And guess what? The top reason is to increase the impact of their giving. So when we think about that last finding that Michael just shared of like how giving circles can engage our 5 T's, and if I'm putting on my hat as like a giving circle member or a giving circle leader, I'm thinking, which of the T's do my members use? Which are we using together? Because if we're coming together to increase our impact by pooling all of our resources, that keyword resources is all of your 5 T's. It's your voice, it's your ties, it's your network, it's all of the things. And so people are coming to do that. Don't be scared to like ask for or offer these types of opportunities for your members. That's what brought them there. They're coming to learn, and folks are sticking around for a hot minute. And so like use this time to say, if there's an issue that we want to talk about, let's learn about it together. We may not know about this, but where can we come together to learn, right? They come together to build relationships with other people. They come together to give to causes and communities that are overlooked. I keep saying that collective giving is trying to disrupt traditional philanthropy, and it's doing it at such a scale that's just so impressive because people are being more intentional and strategic about their giving. They're forming connections locally, not just with their members, but with leaders and nonprofits. And they're also getting to just hang out with their friends, which is, let's call a spade a spade. If it's fun, people come, right? And so I just want to say that the other thing that might be helpful to you all when you're reviewing the research and when we share the slides is like, what are the benefits, right? Like we asked folks, and I guarantee you that at least a few of you in the room filled out that survey, and we asked you, and we said, what is the benefit to being part of this? And it is increasing connection to community and culture. I put out a call and I said, where are my Latinos at, right? But like, who is your community? That sense of like wanting to find others, that sense of like, I may not have a lot of resources. I may have a lot of resources. Whatever it is, how do I do that well? How do I do that in ways that do not sustain the status quo, that really upend and imagine a more abundant future for all of us? Folks want to feel like folks felt that they can make a difference. And I know I can speak for myself as a mother of 2-year-old when I look at the news, I'm like, what can I do? Like what really can I achieve? And the fact that these are spaces where people are like, I know how I can contribute to change is really exciting. And that I can grow my network and I can grow this while having fun and developing my leadership skills. Like, this is all really great stuff. And this is the type of transformation that we're hoping changes the philanthropy of your local community, right? And so, how are folks doing this? Well, you don't have to overthink this, right? There are folks are offered networking and social opportunities, bringing in speakers. I mean, like, look at Grapevine is bringing us into this, right? But like, bringing in other folks to talk to your members, maybe bringing in leaders or workshops, volunteer opportunities. I'm the co-chair of the Social Venture Partners International Board, and I love how much our partners are actually donating their talent to our nonprofit grantees, right? Um, Being able to go out into the community, my giving circle here in San Diego, the Latina Giving Circle, we do site visits as like a way of like additional fundraising, right? So like, we're going in there and being like, and see, give more. Like, look at what is happening. Maybe we have the events there. Meeting with communities, engaging and learning. All of these are things that can be really helpful when you're like, so how do I keep people engaged year round? Like, if we're only giving out grants once a year, what do we do for the rest of the year? You contribute to one another's wellness and learning, and opportunity to challenge and change how money is moved. So with that, I'll pass it back to Michael for the last bucket of finding.
Thanks very much, Adriana. So we see collective giving, and we think we've demonstrated with the research that it is a catalyst for social cohesion and change. And social cohesion is really about ties. To put it in other terms, it's really about social connectedness. Nerdy social scientists like Adriana and myself might call it social capital, but it's community. It's those bonds. And one of the most important bonds that we have is connection with people with whom we disagree. And for us, seeing that being part of a collective giving circle, for 53, more than half of the members, increases their ability to engage with dissenting voices, was a really important and meaningful finding for us, because of the kind of environment in which we live and move these days, where it's rare that you talk with someone you disagree with rather than screaming at them. And in general, it does spur greater levels of civic engagement. And looking at things like giving and raising money, right? 60% people say that they do that more as a result of their connection to a collective giving organization. They tend to discuss issues more. They tend to be more engaged in volunteering, belonging to organizations, sharing their views on social media, and contacting public officials. In an era where we are pessimistic, if not cynical, about the responsiveness of public officials, this can offer a way of trying to get people engaged and thinking about how their voice can really matter. We also find that it encourages bonds within groups, so that we presented yesterday to Amplifier, which bases their giving circles on a shared value of their Jewish faith and values. And one of the beautiful quotations we have in the report is one of the speakers talked about how being a Jew, it means a lot of different things for a lot of different people in different ways. And some are very tied to religious practice, some are more tied to the historical and cultural traditions. And being part of a giving circle is a means for her community to express being Jewish in a variety of ways that brings them together in a common value of giving back to the world, right, of healing the world, which we found very beautiful. Similarly with Muslim groups, women-led groups, BIPOC organizations, Latina Giving Circle Network that Adriana mentioned, that kind of bonding social capital, which is just a fancy way of saying people who are alike, right, birds of a feather flock together, and there's a comfort and there's a support and there's a real value in that. I know I value being with my male friends and I do things with them. I have a lot of women friends too, and there are the moments when I want to be with my male friends and do things that men do, like, I don't know, sewing or quilting. Um, and on the other hand, you can experience bridging social capital. And one of the things that really struck me in our conversations, there were organizations in light of George Floyd's murder that said, we may be an Asian women's giving circle, but we care deeply about what's happening in the Black community. And we want to support a giving circle and the causes that our sister giving circle gives to in the Black community to address that offense and that tragedy in American life. So both that bridging and bonding social capital are important contributions. And then just to wrap up this part of the conversation today, I think I just did, right? That was it. A big thank you. Part of this thank you, Adriana alluded to the fact that many of you have answered this survey. We're grateful to all of you. Emily and the other folks on the Brain Trust for Philanthropy Together were so important in the formulation, design, execution of this research. We owe a big debt of gratitude, and I hope we've tried to adequately express that in the report and in how we've come back and share these results. And I'm delighted to be here, delighted with your questions so far, and happy to answer any other ones you might have.
Yes. Thank you so much, y'all. As you can see, we live and breathe collective giving, and thank you to the folks who want the slides, who want to tag us, who want to do all the things. We will share them, and more importantly, we are now here to answer all of your questions.
Every last one. Thank you so
Every
much,
last one.
Adriana. Thank you so much, Michael. This has been wonderful. Just not only for coming here and presenting today, taking your time out to do this, but for all the incredible work you've put into this and the guidance and support of the broader Giving Circle field. We're all very fortunate to have you and very grateful. So thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, we did promise some time for questions, so I do want to jump into those. And I see one that came in the chat, and I have another one that had come in previously as well. So maybe what we'll do is we'll start with the one that I had, and then we'll jump to the one, Bhavya, in the chat. And then please, as others come in, other thoughts come for questions, please just start adding them into the chat, and we'll try and get to as many of them, all of them, as we can today. So Adriana and Michael, one question that we had was, what is your greatest tip for getting more engagement with your giving circle? And I know, Adriana, you had that great slide and you talked about different ways that giving circles are engaging their members through volunteer opportunities and a variety of others. But anything else to note on that? Any greatest tip you wanted to pull from that?
I'll take this one for with like my Giving Circle hat on, and what the research really says. But the one thing that I will say is that having engagement, like a spectrum of engagement opportunities, is great, right? Like there are going to be the members who like show up, vote, pay, and are like, "This is great, thank you very much," and they're going to be the ones that are like, sleeves up, let's find these orgs, let's do the thing. And so often we try to like put all of our members in one engagement level versus a spectrum, because what's lovely about this is people stay for a really long time. You gave the example, Michael, of the Asian American Women's Circle in New York that's been around for like 20 plus years, right? And so they say like one of the reasons why this was so good for their health is that they met when they were having babies. And now their kids are going to college and their parents have all sorts of health issues, right? And their bodies are also aging. And so what does that mean, right? And so the idea that folks can like come in and sort of like be able to ebb and flow is what keeps this nimble and dynamic. So I would recommend to have that kind of like of a spectrum of folks and allowing folks to be able to engage at the level that they need to engage. And know that will change too.
Yeah. And what I would add to that is, as we were finalizing and writing this report, one of our wonderful colleagues from Philanthropy Together, Isis Krauss, really, it was her idea to include this topology and the archetypes of collective giving groups. And for me, it's a very useful, highly organized and thoughtful menu of how to think about how collective giving works in its many manifestations, as we like to say in English. And there are three ways or three things to think about. And then within those three, 7 options for how organizations solve that. And for example, Grapevine is cited as archetype number 2, which I just had here in my many, the many tabs I have open.
I think it's a crowd granting model. Is that right?
Crowd granting networks. Yep, on page 13 of the report. And the choice is about community. Is it a networking community that is very broad, like that kind of bridging social capital, or is it a belonging community, emphasizing the bonding social capital? Is the size of the group, is it under 25 people, or is it over 100 people? You know, you can just go down. How are decisions made? What's the giving level per person? Some groups, frankly, are very wealthy, people with a lot of resources, and they want to inform their giving jointly. Others find great power in saying, I might only have $25, $100, or $150 to give every year. But if I'm with 50 of my friends, that's meaningful. And that's something important. The geography of gifts, etc. So there, I think you can really find ways of thinking about how you engage a diverse set of members, you know, along the lines of what Adriana was suggesting.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you both for that. And I would just add that we actually did a study here at Grapevine a little bit ago about that spectrum to see, you know, if people aren't engaging that much, do they still feel connected to the work? And what we found through that is that, yeah, people are engaging at different levels, but often those that aren't engaging as much or are still feeling really connected, just knowing that some of these activities are available to them. So they might be very busy at a given moment. So the fact that those things are happening and are available is an important part. And one other just quick note on this for those on the call who do use Grapevine's features, we've tried to build more things to help you connect and engage with members online, which can be a really helpful way to, you know, in between those events and the volunteering opportunities and the other things that you can do offline. And we have seen that if members do share a post, for example, or if you do reach out to connect with them via their profiles and they accept, those can have significant impacts in terms of whether or not they stay in the group, how long they stay. So we're actually working on some research ourselves on some of those findings that we'll be sharing out a little bit later. But you know, the engagement piece can happen online as well as off.
Totally.
Should we go to Bhavya's question? And I apologize, Bhavya, if I'm mispronouncing your name. But I thought this was a really interesting question in the chat about the nonprofit perspective, right? I think nonprofits are learning more and more about giving circles as this movement is growing and trying to figure out how they can engage with this movement. And so I'm curious, Adriana and Michael, your thoughts on nonprofits and how you're seeing them engage in this space.
Yeah, I'll go first, and then Michael, you can go after that. But I will say that it's been very interesting, and I piggyback this with Michael Goldman's question on the foundations, right? Like, there is this opportunity for us to be thinking about, like, in some way, this is the side of philanthropy that is trying to do it differently. But where's this side of fundraisers that are also trying to meet this type of philanthropy that is trying to do differently? And I feel like the Venn diagrams or where the most power can happen is when community centric fundraising practices meet collective giving practices, and like magic happens, right? Like, that to me is like a great space for nonprofits to be thinking. And a lot of it has to do with, and as a fundraiser, like, I can say, like, a lot of it has to do with going all the way back to even how you prospect fund donors, right? Like I said that when I joined my giving circle, I was 30 years old, but I had money to give. And not a single organization had ever asked me for money. The very first organization that asked me for money was a Latino organization that saw me as a philanthropist. And so when we think like, oh, we have to diversify our membership, or we have to do this, so let's get away with the money requirements. With the money requirements, we keep perpetuating this thing that diversification and that democratization of philanthropy, that those people don't have money, that those people don't have resources, right? And so, one of the biggest things that I would say for nonprofits is that when you are trying to diversify your donor base, whether it's by age or gender or whatever aspect you want, like profession, if you need like more finance people, is to really think outside of the box in terms of like, what is my yes? And then make space that removes the barriers for you to get a no. Let me give you another example.
Mm.
One of the people that I interviewed for my dissertation was an incredible community leader with the like his influence to be able to influence policy and change and all of these things were so important. The nonprofit that wanted him on the board had a $10,000 give get, and he turned around and said, can I form a giving circle that supports my give get? And so he asked 20 of his friends every single year to support his give get. I've also seen other nonprofits that are like, no, like we're going to like have like this giving circle for a nonprofit, and we're in 15 different countries. And every year they're going to pick a different country. Every year they might go from like the hunger programming to like the health programming or whatever it is. Like these people, like when you're thinking about how to engage them, think about how you would want your community engaged in your nonprofit, and then make sure that community members are in there. That's a great way to continue to educate your donors and to continue to change who is at your table moving resources to your organization. And I would also point you to community-centric fundraising, which is, I would say, this movement, but for fundraisers. And so that's a really great place that has resources and tools, and like you can literally just download different things. And so that's another great space for when you're thinking about this from the fundraising perspective. Michael?
Yeah, Adriana's always a hard act to follow, but I think there's a couple things, and I'd be remiss. It just popped into my mind that one of my colleagues at Grand Valley at our university, she teaches a course on volunteerism with undergraduates, and she ends the course with a pop-up giving circle, and she uses the Grapevine technology to do that. And one of the things I wanted to just mention here is to think about how you engage youth, how we cultivate a sense of giving, the power of giving, and especially the power of giving collectively among youth for whatever purpose it's channeled. And college students are youth, but a lot of organizations look at kids younger than that. My favorite example is something called the Giving Square, based in Maryland, where they take middle schoolers and they've formed an organization to figure out how to support local causes that they care about. And the idea is kids are philanthropists too. They have a podcast, and it's just a wonderful tool, I think, for rethinking, for thinking about how we build up the democratic skills that we need to live in a more hospitable environment in our country. But getting back a little more specifically to this question about a nonprofit, archetype number 7, as I refer to our reading, not that I'm shamelessly trying to get you to read the report or anything, is
But we are.
supporting. It's about host supporting organizations. And we had a couple of interesting interviews and focus group participants that operate giving circles that channel funds to a particular cause. And Adriana kind of alluded to this, but it is a way of engaging a community, thinking about Mercy Corps has a donor base of aging women largely, and they want to think about how do we expand that? How do we get younger folks, men, involved in this, and giving donors a choice and autonomy. If they want to support Mercy Corps, that's great, but they could support operations in various countries, medical support for early childhood, maternal mortality prevention, and really identify causes that they care more deeply about, with the hope that that would engage them in the long term. And if, in a sense, if it doesn't sort of pay off that investment for Mercy Corps, you've cultivated a habit of giving, and
Yeah.
you've cultivated skills of philanthropy that are going to stay with a person.
Yes.
So
And-
that.
No, I was going to interrupt you.
Go
Just
ahead.
say I was very excited. I want to add to that and then go back to Michael Goldman's question, because that's a great point, Michael, about like it makes me go back to why are people coming into collective giving, looking at those reasons, knowing that folks stay a really long time and that their engagement ebbs and flows. The learning part of it as a nonprofit, especially if you have so many programs and proximity and community voice, invest in your donors' learning. That's going to really transform your local fundraising context, not just for you, but for everyone else. So that's one point. And then, Michael, you talked about what's the connection with foundations, private foundations, and with giving circles. And let me just say that I'm constantly trying to like slap them around to say, like, please, please, please see this as part of your due diligence. Like when something happens to me, that's like right now when like we're insane, when there was like a rise in like anti-Asian violence in California and everything, I went to the Grapevine directory, looked for the closest Asian American giving circle in my community, said, who are they funding? And I just moved my money there. That's how I give in disasters. That's how I give when there's a crisis. I start with the directory, go into the local circle, see who they're funding. And my big thing to foundations is these groups are small, they're community led, they represent and do all the things that you want to do, but they're not going to meet your due diligence bias. And if you don't start by really questioning what is being perpetuated by your due diligence bias, you're not going to get to them. Fund who these groups are funding.
I love that so
And-
much.
and
And
just-
I will, oh, sorry, Michael, please
ahead.
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Very, very quickly, the other thing, if you're trying to fundraise for a nonprofit, use that directory. Most giving circles fund locally. They tend to fund within the same city or metro area, certainly the same state. Some are national and international, but if you're a local organization, look in your zip code, look in the surrounding areas. So thanks,
Yeah.
Emily. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you for that addition. I'm also excited about this angle because I think there's so much more impact we can all have together if we enlist more of those
Yeah.
foundations and those pools of capital out there in this work that we're all doing. And I will just share that we are seeing foundations also using this model to get money out there. So a couple of quick examples, in case this sparks any ideas from any of you or people you think that you should tell about this. The Richard Schultz Foundation, that's the founder of Best Buy. He's been running a Giving Circle donation matching program for several years now, where he will match Giving Circle donations up to $5,000 or 50% of the total amount
Wow.
given for a particular network, for the 100 Who Care Alliance network giving circles. We have also seen some others coming into this space on both the in-kind and philanthropic contributions as far as matching. We just did a collaboration with Bomba Socks, and they matched in kind with 10,000 socks that they sent to organizations that were addressing homelessness in local communities that our Giving Circle supported in Q1 of this year during a really critical time for people experiencing homelessness. Next week, I'm actually going to LA to announce, so this is a little insider for you, but to announce a new collaboration with a large corporate foundation that is providing a large gift to provide matching donations to Giving Circles in the LA area, but then we're looking to expand it from there. So lots of interesting ways, I think, that we're starting to get them involved.
Yeah.
And in some cases, we're even seeing those like Newman's Own Foundation putting money in the pool, $100,000 they did at the end of last year. And then they invited a broad community to come and nominate nonprofits and vote and help them decide where to distribute the funds. So it's not always done in a matching capacity. It's also done in just a seeding capacity. And let's let the community then tell us where to send these funds. So I think we'll see a lot more, I'm hoping from this community if especially if all of us continue to raise that and bring others into the fold. Okay, well, I think we are just about at time. Again, Michael, Adriana, thank you so much for the time today, for all the work, for the inspiration and passion behind all of this and the heart. It's really abundantly clear. And we so appreciate you taking the time. And I think for all of you who attended, I also just want to thank you for being here and for taking time to learn and, dive deeper into this movement and learn more and be inspired. And we really want to turn this into something that is helpful for you all in terms of engaging your members and engaging new members, recruiting new people into the movement. So Gabby's going to be putting together some takeaways and some fun materials on all the things that you've learned today, or some of the things anyway. There's a lot in there that you can easily share with your giving circles and share out on your socials if that's what you would like to do. So we'll be sending that in follow up, what, Gabby, in the next week or so?
Yeah,
Something like
exactly.
that. Okay, perfect. So we'll be sending more soon. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. And Adriana and Michael, thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, y'all. Thank you for
Thanks,
being here.
everyone.
Thank you.